So Christopher is an American-born choreographer and performance artist working from London. He holds a BFA from New York University Tisch School of the Arts and an MA in choreography from Trinity Laban. His video and performance works have been presented in Sadler's Wells Theatre, Art Night 2018, Victoria and Albert Museum, Enclave Gallery, and alongside other venues. There's a very, very long list. His dance works have been performed in NYC, Guatemala, Germany, Taiwan, Spain, London, and Edinburgh. Matthew's Untitled Video Portrait radio edit won first prize at the Choreographic Captures competition with New Adventures, and his films have been in distribution across cinemas in Germany and Switzerland. I'm going to stop there because I'm sure that Christopher has a lot more to say. So I will pass you over.
Hi, everybody. So welcome and thank you for coming. And I can tell you a little bit about my work. And if you have any questions, I'll try to leave some time at the end to ask some questions, or also if it's something that is happening during the you want to know a little bit more, totally, say hey and we can chat. Yeah, because I have loads I could say, and also loads I don't have to say. We can just kind of have fun. So tonight I have titled sort of my talk Pop Goes Dance History, and that's we'll come to kind of why that makes sense, or why that is the title was there. But yeah, my name is Christopher Matthews, and I usually work under also a title called Formed View, which I'll kind of explain. And I'm a choreographer, performer, visual artist, and also a curator. And it's kind of really hard when people ask me, because I'm not neither a visual artist or a choreographer. They kind of, now my practice, they're all just sort of intertwined. It feels like I have a very strong dance practice that ends up being in the kind of visual arts sort of presentation or sector, or turning venues, dance venues, into more like visual art settings. So I try to kind of mix everything up a bit. But I guess one thing to say, what comes to my practice, is that I'm absolutely, for me, I love dance. I've been doing this since I was a child. And so I'm obsessed with dance history, and I'm obsessed with everything about dance. I want to learn about every new style. And with that, I also, I'm always kind of, it's like, well, how can I sort of work with it? For me, it's all about, dance is something that needs to be worked with, needs to be generating movement. And so it just becomes a bit of a, I just kind of always thinking, what's next? What can I do with it? How can I break it from its original form and toss it up and mix it around in a blender? And I guess also something I should mention to you, I identify as queer and neurodivergent and working class. Neurodivergent is really important for you to know before we go on this tour about my work, is that I have ADHD. So for me, I've been trying to also access this in my work. So I kind of can be a bit, I can have like too much information, not enough information, or it all goes in between. So sometimes I can go off on a tangent too. So if I go far away, you can kind of pull me back in and say, hey, what are we still talking about? But that's just also how I kind of generate information. And I've been trying to think about that more recently, and how I also present work, so that I kind of give people a sort of a position of how I experience the world, which is through loads of sensorial experience, and needing that hyper sensorial experiences to be able to focus on one specific topic. And yeah, I guess all the other things are kind of just things that come up later on in my practice. But yeah, I'm a massive lover of the 90s and noughties pop culture, specifically music, and being an ex-club kid. Is important to mention that my practice usually follows dance history, and trying to mix with dance history to try to explore or problematize some, or actually raise visibility to some of the problems in dance history, but also too, I'm being an ex-club kid, I'm really interested in also the kind of party culture. And not necessarily creating like big raves, but to understand what elements make social experiences and make these kind of overwhelming memorial kind of experiences for us to think, well, how can we come together? And so I've kind of moved away from the loud music, but I'm also thinking, how can we still party, but from a softer point? And anything you should know is that most importantly, Jan Jackson is the most important person in my life. And I just dedicated my last exhibition completely to her, which we'll get to at some point. So I guess, oh, okay. So the thing about, oh, there's someone wants to be admitted. Am I now the host? I have to do that. I can do that really quickly and welcome them. Great. And so I mentioned formed view, and that's it's important to acknowledge that performance work. This is the kind of text that I write about it as a disclaimer whenever I present my work, but it's just to acknowledge that that as a performance maker, the work is being created from an idea that I came up with, and I shape it and I create the material, but it's also being created live. So I can't accept the full authorship. I have to acknowledge that it's being created by multiple performers or collaborators who are helping me either with working with some technology or lighting, or have put up the sets and everything that I need for my work. And as well as, because it is performance, it also involves that interaction with the audience. So it's really, you are part of the making. We can, I can be in a gallery moving and moving and moving, and that means that I'm just generating material that's never being looked at. But as soon as someone enters into the gallery, then all of a sudden that material has purpose because it's being received. So I also acknowledge that the visitor is part of that contract and exchange of creating knowledge around the work. And so I talk about work, and I kind of have split it into different types of work that I make, which is I make sculpture, and I'll explain what sculpture means to me. I also do video and film work, and I also have started working with collage. And then finally, I'll tell you a little bit about my curatorial practice, which has kind of come out of making my own work and kind of thinking about this multiple avenues that come with being someone who experiences the world through multi-sensorial, multi-image knowledge, everything. That I basically can't create a show that's just for my work. I have to sort of invite other ideas and topics around the same thing to help me focus my themes. So we'll start with my sculpture work, which is actually humans. So being a choreographer, I started finding myself I come from a very classical dance background. But I always found that I didn't have this kind of body or the typical dancer body. And I found that my work was always about the image. So people would say, okay, you need to lose weight, or you need to do this, you need to cut your hair short, you need to do that. And I always found that it was never about my technicality, or my technical ability. It was about actually what I look like. And I realized very early on that I, being a short, pudgy dancer and working in ballet, I was never going to play a prince, because princes have very specific body types. And so I was always sort of the other character. So I started to kind of think about this a lot, and I started to work a bit about how can I problematize dance history, take it and think about what is dance history from a point of view of image. And then I started to really investigate also too the working. Oh, we got another person. Let's just say hello to them too. Does this work? Okay. Oh, hey. There we go. We're going to let them in. Great. I mean, multitasking, it's very good for my ADHD. So I wanted to also think about myself as a performer and what are some of the problems I had come up with in my own practice. And one of the things I early on started to realize is that in my background of working in more classical ballet and also in some early modern dance is that I had been performing sort of a kind of heterosexuality and masculinity that was sort of never really discussed. It just was kind of, it was just like a kind of complicit. And I realized this and I thought, oh, there's a real issue. And there's also been this sort of historical issue about the male dancer and its presence and also its acceptance from society, having a male dancer. So one of the first works I've made was Lads. And so I see it as a sculptural work because it sits in its timing, it sits in the gallery in the same way that a sculpture would. So when you open the doors, the work is there and it's already working the same way that a marble statue is already working for you in the gallery. And when you go home at night at 6 p.m. the doors get locked, the piece is still there the same way the marble sculpture is still there. So the live works I make, I really position them that, and that they also have this 360-ness to them, that you can move around them, that they are not placed on stages to have a distance or a fourth wall that gets broken. For me, it's really about putting dance and really emphasizing its image-based culture to question some themes. So here in Lads, my first sort of successful work, I kind of got interested about this kind of masculinity, heterosexuality that's sort of implicit without ever spoken about. And I started to think about it in dance history. And there's a choreographer, Ted Shawn, who's one of the early pioneers of modern dance. It said that, well, men can dance if they are like the Greek gods. And so he also is implying that they have to be this kind of Olympiads. And so I started to kind of think about that. And I started to sort of place masculinity starting from kind of early sculpture and how it then influenced early modern dance. And so you have these kind of you have these two figures who are in Adidas tracksuits, and they are moving slowly, somewhat like a dance battle, where you would see hip hop dancers, and one would do a trick, and then the other one would do a trick, and they try to impress, and then you figure out who's the most impressive, and then they win the battle. Well, in this piece, the tricks are actually they are poses from historical homoerotic sculptures and also early modern dance pieces where masculinity is at the center of it. So, and they basically, these two performers are moving slowly and melting through, almost in a way of never accomplishing the pose. By the time they get to a pose, they kind of move out of it. And this to me is about trying to think about how actually being an Olympiad is always, or masculinity, if it's to be an Olympiad, is never really attainable. Like only a few actually attain that position. And so what's happening is also, you see, I have a telephone for you. One of the things to try to bring it back into pop culture, and what's the issue with image culture that's happening, is how does image culture really influence what we think masculinity is? And so during the piece, we're actually creating what I call a digital occupy moment, where we're trying to basically take over the hashtag Lads and reproduce other images that maybe add to this digital dialogue about masculinity. And so when the work is happening, there's one person who's photographing the one performer, and then when they swap, it's vice versa. And we try to basically take over this feed as much as possible. In a way that it almost becomes, there's not just photos, but also videos. So all of a sudden you have these guys at a sporting event, and then you have these kind of people in the tracksuits rolling around on the floor looking, and it almost disrupts the image, because you're just kind of like, there's something not right there. So for me, it was just kind of, how can I kind of challenge that and also be a bit more fun, because the piece you walk in and it's kind of, it can be mesmerizing, but it's not beating the politics into your face, which is what I kind of like, which is how I kind of play with pop culture, and how pop culture can be political, depending on how you use it. Or we can, some people can think of pop culture as low art, but I think of it actually as it could be a political, a mechanism for something, for politics. And I think this really plays into my being from working class background. How can how can the image of working class also be portrayed in pop culture? And so the same way I was saying how, masculinity is being portrayed. And I kind of thought about this as a way that, yeah, dance history is really kind of camp. And when you think about it, these lads in these Adidas tracksuits, they're actually kind of camp, because they're kind of performing a hyper real image. But again, it's kind of it's just kind of one way of trying to deal with it. Another work in the sense of the sculpture is this piece. It's a new work that I just produced this past summer, or it presented this summer. It was produced 2 years ago, but it's called My Body's Number One. And I wanted to also think about the problem with the plinth and the podium, and how one is high art and one is low art, and trying to build this relationship between working class and high art. And so I started to think, well, go-go boys are there looking to be desired, as in the same way that nude sculptures on plinths are there in museums to be desired. And why is one high art and one low art? So I made this work, My Body's Number One, where you have these two figures on actually podiums. And I realized that in the photos I showed you, you don't see them, but they are actually on visual art plinths. And they're just gyrating this whole time. And you see the Degas sculpture in the bottom corner. And that's also, for me, was trying to find the glue in dance history and art history. And I started to think about these ballerinas of the Paris Opera, and how they used to also pose a lot for a visual artist in the Expressionist period. And also, they were also sex workers to make extra income. And it really makes me also think that also the body of the dancer is also kind of being sold. And in a way, no one's really addressing that actually we're selling our body every night on stage, in the same way that, because it's high art, but why is go-go dancing not high art? And it stays in the kind of dark underground of the clubs. So you have these kind of ballet figures performing this very sensual dance on top of platforms. And in a way, they're trying to be desirable, but never referencing the audience members who are in the same space with them. So this is some of my kind of, this is some more of the sculpture works, and there are some others that I'm producing, and I'm currently now working on a new work that's going to explore wrestling culture, and how it's kind of still quite homophobic and aggressive, but still is desired within the kind of gay male community. So this is the new work that I'm working on. And also I'm also working on another sculpture that's actually made for two older males, and looking at what desire of the male figure in a much sort of later in life. So the performers I'll be working with will be over 65, and to try to kind of think that desirable bodies aren't just for young 20, 30 max. And so these are the kind of new works that are in the process at the moment. So I mentioned I made make video works, and one of the works that was mentioned in the intro is I untitled video portraits. Now this was a work where I started to think about trying to fuse music video choreography and to play with it, and also to think about how gender codes are, like what makes something male, female, masculine, feminine, playing with different identities. So what I did is I made these untitled video portraits, which are these kind of working like with music video choreography for the face. So when you see a singer and they're singing to the camera, they're also playing with the camera with a little bit of some choreography, either with the eyes, with a little bit of gesture, a little smizing. And so there's 10 portraits, and I perform only facial expressions to diva pop songs. And each video is a different portrait from a different sort of diva pop singer. And what I've done is I've removed the sound, so you no longer hear, you only see the facial expressions. And there's quite, as like you see at this photo, there's a quite intense stare back at the person. So it's almost like the dialogue that you're having with with whoever is watching it. So in these films, actually, it's quite interesting is that they have played in different settings, in gallery settings, and also they have been online at sort of some digital film festivals. But some of the interesting thing is that they were played in Switzerland before films, as with the kind of trailers, in a way to basically sort of disrupt the normal typical Hollywood cinema that's entering cinemas and trying to allow people to think about other forms of film and video. So it was interesting that, it's like before you would see Spider-Man, like you would have this 1 minute video of me kind of like flirting with you in the dark, which I like, because it takes the work out of its traditional setting or format and puts it into another format that allows you to kind of rethink again that mode of performance or mode of presentation. So yeah, these films are still sort of in circulation now. So they have inspired a few more other films. One that is kind of referencing Yvonne Rainer's original hand dance, where she looked at just choreography for the hand. And so I'm now trying to, with the new works, think about also what happens when the body is basically sort of outlined and expressed through hand choreography, where it's all about just touching the body, and how do you sexualize the body through just your own touch. So these are the next series that are in production at the moment. The other film that I have made, which is more of an experimental sound piece, is kind of blending my interest in what I was saying about club culture. And so this work is, the sound element of the work is taking live found sound from a small village in Spain while I was in residency there in the south of Spain. And I filmed all the plants in the village at night, and then took the sounds of how people were interacting late at night for the cobblestones and doors and whatever sounds that were coming about. And I tried to bring them to compose them into techno and decompose them. So in a way that live sound almost becomes almost like a club beat. And the dramaturgy of the whole work tries to think about a night of clubbing in a 30-minute period. So you have this sort of soft getting ready images and sound, and then it slowly builds up and it gets to the moment where you're at the club, and then it almost gets to a place where you've been in the club so much that your body starts to shift and its chemicals being released, you get a bit more sensual, and then you find yourself at the end when the club is closing and you're walking home in the silence of the night, and you're kind of have this weird where your body is vibrating from the sound. that you of being inside of a club to then walking home and having that physical vibration in the body with the silence around you. And so that's the work, is trying to kind of give you a kind of quick dramaturgy of that evening. It also plays with a little bit of fashion, and so again, it's working with trying to just put together outfits, some with real clothes, some with found objects, and again, a sense about how how do you present yourself too when you're out in a club, and how also too can plants and clothing both are decor. There's certain types of decor around us that we have. So I'm and they represent certain identities. Identities in the public sphere and identities of your own personal identity. And so those are a little bit of the works. And another thing is I do is installation, because I started to really think about dance and how can we experience dance more than watch it. So I started to create more installational pieces that allow you to kind of feel or question, are you the visitor or the audience member, or are you inside of the artwork? So you are the work. The first one is a piece that I just produced called A Star is Born. And this too is kind of thinking about how club culture plays a part in the idea of celebrity. So some of my works do think about celebrity or iconic personas. And so Nureyev, a famous ballet dancer, you see the book here and there's a red flower. He actually used to think that it wasn't enough for him to be a good dancer, for him to be to really fulfill that full celebrity icon status. He had to be out in the public sphere and allow people to admire him. So he used to always go clubbing after every performance. And it was also for him to have this kind of sexual release, to let go the kind of tension that was created from performing in the evening. Then he would get to the club and let it release and allow people to admire him and to be seen by others. He really thought this was, every dancer needs to explore this if they want to actually move to the next level and in stardom. So I created this installation in actually a theater dressing room where we turned all the traditional lights into disco lights. And then in all the dressing rooms of the theater, we basically turned every dressing room into a disco itself, with music and disco lights, and blurring the lines between club and which also has this kind of underground culture, and dressing rooms where you don't necessarily have access to. So they're almost VIP, both of these. To go to Studio 54, you have to be VIP. To go into the dressing room to meet the dancers, you have to be at VIP. So I kind of played with that and giving everyone the kind of access that they don't normally get to have. And then another work is Look at That Body, which is my most recent show, was actually taken from a Janet Jackson lyric, which I'll tell you a bit later. But one of the new works I created was this trying to put the visitor in a moment of presentation. And so for them to be able to move through the space, they have to pass through this stage spotlight, which blinds you because you cannot see in front of you, which is what we as dancers always are in. But at the same time behind it, I have remixed Janet Jackson's lyrics, all the girls at the party, look at that body. And so basically you have Janet Jackson sort of chanting or hackling at you, or basically taunting you, which in a way it's just changes the perspective of the audience member to becoming now the performer. We have an audience member here, and I call her performer, who's dancing because she kind of loved the way, because it does build rhythmically the sound, the way that I've edited it over and overlaying the phrase over and over again. But others found it sort of uncomfortable because all of a sudden they didn't find themselves or didn't realize that they would be put into the position of performing. And the work is actually placed very specifically at the beginning of the exhibition to sort of kind of forewarn people that from this point on, there's going to be moments where you are going to find yourself in the spotlight, as easy to say. So this is Look at Your Body. The last installation work is called 20 Remix. This is something I did back in 2013 and have shown versions of it. And it's an installation because it's involving 16 videos that make up a video wall. So it's 16 individual videos that make up a video wall. There are 4 different soundscapes. There's also text works, which basically I tried to remix the 20 years of my dance career at this point in 2013. And I tried to source material from every dance I've ever done in the last 20 years. And then I allowed I put a call out for anonymous collaborators to take this vocabulary or source material and remix it and then give it back to me to learn, which was also questioning the position of the dancer as a labor. Like, we just perform movements. Sometimes we are in a position where we're just told to do and we do it. And so for me, I was basically using my own sort of archive of movement and relearning it as just a laborious act. And then that made up all the material. It also talks, the sound pieces in the work also talk about moments in my career where people have commented on my body, and how my body plays a very important role in the work I have done or the work that I have been offered. And so it also, for a way, it problematizes that there's a very set image of what a dancer is, and in a way that doesn't allow for that actually dance is a physical act. It's not a visual act. And so a lot of the works are talking about how people are commenting on that I don't have the right body, or I need to shift or lose weight or do something to actually fit into what is a traditional form if I want to have a successful career. And which is ironic because here I am showing 20 years of work after 20 years of criticism that I'm not going to have a successful career. So it's a retrospective that problematizes body image in the dance industry. So, and recently during the pandemic, I needed to find ways to continue my practice, which needed to get out of the body and try to still work with bodies, but try to find ways that necessarily I could do, as everybody has been in the pandemic, that are more on paper or smaller, or could fit into, you can do it at home. I was a person who wasn't very interested in dancing in my living room. I found that like such a really problem to that private versus public, and this is not the right setting that this is supposed to happen. So I moved into doing drawing and collages. And it did come from a proposition in the show that I was creating, that I mentioned a few times, Janet Jackson's show, that I was working with Sadler's Wells, and I said that the show is about dance history and working with dance history, but I need to acknowledge that this show also is taking place in a dance historical theater. So I first started to work with their archive, and I started to look at their posters from the last 80 years and realizing that the marketing of a body is a beginning of image culture, similar to what I was doing in LADS, which is skinny or high legs or big virtuosic movement so that the show would sell. So what I tried to do is remake marketing posters out of their posters, kind of disrupt or change the bodies, can create different creatures, monsters, and then place them in theater poster format. So this has started to be the first project that I started with collage. And then I started to also then work with dance magazine images, cutting up dance magazines. And again, seeing that there's a lot about legs, skinny legs, or lots of flexibility, not because how you can't really portray dance in an image because it's an ephemeral art. A movement is gone in a second, and that's actually the form. You know, that's the line on the page, but we are left with these images which become stereotypical: ballerinas' legs, muscle toned arms, very flexibility, lines that don't actually reflect the kind of ephemeral art. So this is a constant practice, and I basically take every month dance magazines apart every month, and I try to make collages with each month. Sometimes it's as simple as 2 images, sometimes it becomes multiple images, or taking the whole magazine itself and putting it, remaking it. But this is a kind of ongoing practice that I've started. I started, and then I started a line drawing practice, and it's called Broken Lines because I started to think about, when I was making the piece, My Body's Number One, that, you know, that actually sculptures are just lines. And I remember when I was in university, me and my friends used to question, like, we would wonder, do you think he's gay? Do you think he's gay? And we would always be like, I don't know, look to see if he's got any broken lines, because if he has any broken lines, then he must be a homosexual. So I started to go and do line drawings of sculptures and just finding the angles of the body. And so I started to make these line drawings out of postcards of male paintings, paintings of male bodies and male sculptures. I've also expanded the drawing into doing tape work. So here you see is one of the drawings. This is Michelangelo's David, and it is used with neon tape. And I was showing a few of these pieces in blacklight to also emphasize again a bit more of that kind of club culture where bodies are just lines and figures in a dark space. The last thing I guess to show you is my curation, and there are 2 basically curatorial lines, but something I've been thinking about is what is queering curation? So how can you queer the curatorial practice? How can you queer the exhibition presentation? And so, and that means that could be as simple as, instead of hanging an object at the right level, which we all say is supposed to be eye level, blah, blah, blah. I put, in my last exhibition, I put things very low on the floor. I put things actually on the floor. I put things on the ceiling. I kind of disrupted the space. I would put objects on the wall, but then the lighting to light it would not be lighting it. It would be lighting a totally different portion of the wall, and just basically making things odd and disrupting the way the visitor could experience it. So this is through my exhibition, My Body's an Exhibition, which comes from a Janet Jackson song, Feedback. And she talks about what is that feedback mechanism between the person who is sexually performing for their lover. And I think about it in the same way that dancers, that we have this feedback loop, the same thing I talked about in the form view. We have this feedback loop where we're performing for someone and we get the information back from them. You can see the images are looking like latex, and these were designed by the graphic designers and exhibition designers, John Philip Sage and Ignacy Casa, and they wanted to bring Janet Jackson's video feedback also really to the exhibition space. So she's wearing lots of latex in that show, so they tried to make all the marketing to be more latex, like with these bodies coming through. So I was invited by Sadler's Wells to curate a show of my work and other artists around me who have similar themes around playing with the body or choreographing the body in a visual space or questioning identity and using choreography to question identity. So I presented an exhibition through the theater, which is usually a more traditional theater that's showing like classical works, English National Ballet, Pina Bausch, and sometimes they get a bit more, some of the more experimental stuff gets put in their smaller theater in the back. But in this show, I wanted to open the theater space to the audience. So they come through the front door like they normally are, and then they find themselves walking through the theater. They find themselves in the auditorium watching a film, almost empty auditorium. And then we take them into the backstage spaces. So places people never get to go, those dressing rooms, directly onto the stage, into the dance studios. Everything is in the bathrooms. And I really wanted to not only show dance has so much possibility, but it also has, you know, it's like a love story to the theater. The show was really a love song. And so you got to see how much I love dance by allowing you to visit every area where dance takes place. And so these are a few images from the show of different artists, which also included my work, Lads, My Body's Number One, Look at That Body installation, and also The Star is Born. But we also allowed people to go through the spaces, and I tried to kind of make the theater less, I basically tried to trash the theater. So I brought in all these tinsel curtains and balloons. And so in hallways, in stairwells, I kind of basically put all this kind of decor so that you knew where you're going, but I also tried to lower this high art theater and make it a bit trashier for my working class background. And the last thing I want to tell you is about my queer house parties, which I started to really think about how institutions can be a bit difficult for people, especially queer people, and also that not everybody wants to club with loud clubbing anymore. And yes, I was a raver, but now I'm really for soft clubbing. And so I thought, how can you make spaces that feel more like house parties and soften the institution? So on the left, I was invited to the V&A during their home Friday late, and I basically created an exhibition that looks almost like a house party where all the artists are usually invited, and they're not called artists, they're called host. So every artist actually acts as a host as it's their party, and they have activities and they have themes. So this one had the theme of decorating. So there people could do embroidery. There were people making wallpaper. There was a makeup artist teaching you to do your makeup. And then on the right is the one that I did in Vienna, which it was a kind of movie night, and we stayed up all night, and we also, it was kind of a workshop / party. We talked about what it meant to make a house party, and then we made basically a flat inside of a dance room, a dance studio, by finding furniture, decorating, and then we watched movies, and we watched Dirty Dancing, and we talked about how Dirty Dancing can be a queer or looking at the queer representation in dance, in Dirty Dancing. This is another photo from another event. I've done it about four times now. And yeah, it's really beautiful to soften these spaces, to make them more inviting to communities who wouldn't necessarily walk into the V&A. Last thing I want to say is that also part of my curation is that, and also part of my ADHD of giving more and more, is that I just can't leave everything in the space. So a lot of times I create Spotify playlists for all my events so that you can have something to take home with you. For My Body's an exhibition that I did at Sadler's Wells, I made a playlist to get you revved up for the exhibition. So people got it in their email with their ticket so that they could come to the theater and already listening to music that's getting them in the mode. And this is a wristband, which actually is filled with flower seeds. So everybody got a wristband that when they went home, they could plant and have flowers. So dancers always get flowers in their performance. And since the audience members also are performers, they also got flowers. So they show up and it feels like this festival. They get a festival wristband. And then at the end, they're told that actually if they plant it, then they get their flowers for the end of their performance. So for me, I always have this more is more feeling with my work, to allow people also to know that as a person living with ADHD, I can't just watch one thing, or I can't just talk about one thing. I have to have multiple things. I need to do something with my hands so that I can focus on the topic, or do something while I'm watching TV. So yeah, I tried to give that in the experience. So that's it. That's my work in practice. And if anybody has any questions, it'd be great. I guess we can come back to stop sharing. And
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Christopher. That was such an exciting talk. I feel like I loved everything about your practice, especially your like approach to curation, like, is in like the queering curation. I love
I
it.
want to say also the queering of the curation too is, I think that curation is social.
Yeah.
So I really think about, if I was having a dinner party, who would I invite? Because I know that they need to have a conversation. And so I really think that too, with bringing work together. So yeah, it's for me is to queer it is to be also that it's not so stark. It's that it's fun and social.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
Cool.
I'm just gonna go to the people questions first. I think Tasmin's got her hand raised if you want to unmute and ask.
Hi, yes, that was really fantastic. Chris, I wanted to ask you about, has your relationship with video changed? I know you said that obviously with video, the person interacting and watching the video is also a performer in that sense. But then you also mentioned that during the pandemic, you sort of resisted the sort of filming yourself dancing in your living room kind of vibe. And I noticed that a lot of your more recent works have strayed away from video. Has your relationship with video changed, do you think, as a result of the past couple of years?
It's well, I would say yes, because also I used to work with video quite a lot earlier in my practice, maybe much more like 7 years ago. And that was also because I do have a background in photography. I studied photography. I double majored in dance performance and photography. And so I think that I kind of moved away from the camera as a formal artwork, and I started to think about also how can we play with image culture. And that's why like the Lads has an Instagram, and also has an Instagram account that you can follow called Lads 2017, and you can follow it so that you that also becomes an exhibition. So besides occupying it, it also becomes its own exhibition space. And I guess I've used the camera also more recently as a mechanism to make something else happen that isn't necessarily formal as a video. So Lads actually has a sound work that by a sound device by Nato Heda, who is a performance coder. And he has basically, I said, there's a problem in dance where there's a hierarchy between music and dance. And so people relate to music first. So what he did is we worked together in making this device that uses the camera to film the performers when they're moving. And since they're moving at a very slow glacial rate, it slows the song Sexy Boy down to the same speed. So the song Sexy Boy by Air. So when they speed up, then you get a little bit of Sexy Boy. And so I've been playing with the camera in a way of how it is this kind of liaison between something else. And another work actually I'm doing, me and Nato are working on is an interactive video that's kind of like a video game that it's called Walk For Me. And basically you have to basically I am there performing. I've actually took all the stage walks from Janet Jackson's Velvet Rope tour, and but to make my body work, you also have to walk across the stage. And so the video only interacts if you interact. And so again, the camera becomes this mechanism to between the performer who's digital and the performer who is the spectator. Yeah, so it's kind of changed from a very formal. It's also me, I have to say, it does come from me recognizing that if I'm going to be an artist, I can't pretend. I'm working class. I don't have the possibilities to the fanciest cameras, to this anything. So how can I still work with photography, but do it from a more cheaper working class approach? An iPhone. What do I have? An iPhone, or I got a webcam, you know? So
Yeah.
mhm.
So it's also just I found the accessibility of the sort of having a Spotify. It's like the idea of someone going to a concert or something and taking away a piece of merchandise, but you're not paying for it.
No.
You don't have to, it doesn't have those barriers in place, which I found brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
So we've also got a message from Andrea in the chat. I'm just going to read it out to you. Being an artist who makes work about the body myself, I find your practice absolutely inspiring. I'd love to see one of your performances live. What would you tell someone who would like to try to dance but doesn't feel very confident about their body?
Yeah, this is a really important thing that, you know, as a dancer, a professional dancer, I have been constantly be told that my body isn't enough. And there's just something about actually not listening to outside sources and starting to think my body is enough. And I am a dancer, and I am a dancing body because I dance. And this in and so, and I think one of the things, I think there's been a really great movement in body positive, positive culture. And I'm not sure I really like that term, body positive, but I think there has been a good movement, especially for female identifying performers. But I still think there's a lot of work in recognizing male identifying performers not having that traditional sense. But I guess you have to think for yourself that if you enjoy dancing, then you should do it, and then you should recognize that then you are a dancer.
Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions actually.
Sure.
You seem like you're absolutely infatuated with Janet Jackson. I was just wondering how like that came about. Like, when did Janet like first come into your life, and why are you still?
I'm a dancer because of Janet Jackson, actually. When I was a child, Janet was of course, she was in her the prime, and I was obsessed, and all her videos were about dancing. And so I used to learn all her choreographies. And so I started to dance because my actual goal as a child was to be a backup dancer for Janet Jackson. So this is the only reason I started dancing. It's because I wanted to work for her, which I still haven't, but maybe I have decided to, if I can't work for her directly, then I will work with her indirectly. And so I've kind of made a pact to myself that tried to inspire all my exhibitions for at least the next 5 years based on her songs, starting with my body's my body's an exhibition. I'm working on trying to develop an exhibition at the moment with just my line drawings called taking a lyric from her song Nasty, which is talking about nasty boys and all the kind of, so that's something I really want to keep working with. And again, how can pop culture inspire us to think about political themes? So Janet has just been there. She's been there. I mean, I even tried to get her to come to my show in Sadler's Wells because she lives in London. So I was like, who knows her? Because I need to meet her. But yeah, it's been since I was a child. Yeah.
I really hope that she sees you and sees your whole practice.
Me too. If you guys know her, please.
I feel like she'd be so appreciative of it.
I think so too. She's really interested in what people, you can see also through her Instagram. She's one of those artists who really empowers people to work with her music and her videos, where other artists, I was doing something with Nicki Minaj's work, and I actually was told, like, you need to make no reference. She's not interested in anyone. She will sue you like nobody's business. So I mean, the portraits were originally titled after Nicki Minaj's songs, and so you know, like, you can see the difference in the sense of generosity in her work too. That's why I'm still inspired by her. There's another question I see.
Yeah, is it Noyal? Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Hi, hello. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Nice to see you in our office.
Yes. Me and our colleagues.
Hey, yeah, great. Thanks. It's lovely talk. It's lovely to get to know a bit more about your work and the richness of it. I just was wondering, you talk quite a few times about you brought a lot of history sometime in the kind of emergence of ideas. You talk about Nureyev and like different kind of anecdotes, but quite a lot of actually knowledge, historical knowledge of dance. And so I was just kind of wondering, dance and popular culture as well. I was just wondering, what's the role of history in your work? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for me, it's that coming from a background that, like, my early dance career was performing in more historical based works. And that's where I started to think, and more recently, I started to think that actually there's loads of issues with dance history around, I mean, first of all, dance history is it needs to be decolonized. It's quite white, it's quite American or European. And I started to think about also my own experience, how it was. And so for me, dance history is, I've been thinking about how can I queer it, or how can I rethink dance history to question some of the problems I have with it. So a lot of also to, like I said, like with Lads, the work really is trying to question historical moments where masculinity is supposed to be there. But at the end of the day, they're actually quite camp, and they don't actually, they don't meet masculinity in the way that popular culture is also developing the image of masculinity. So I really have been just trying to think about how I can rework with the history and problematize it, or actually, and the wrestling work that I slightly mentioned that I'm working on next is called Je, and it's based after a trio that was originally meant for three men, and it was supposed to be a kind of love affair between three men, which was problematic in history. And so the work actually is, I want to re-queer Je and bring it back to three men who are having this kind of desire, love affair, threesome. And that's how I'm going to play with the dance history there, is to reinsert the queerness that was originally there in the original work that didn't make it to the final production. So it's just trying to queer and think about how dance history, we don't have to discard it because of its problems, but we can continue to learn from it or work from it. And that's what I want to try to do.
Yeah, great. It's a sense of kind of reenacting history in its kind of more contemporary setup and challenging it.
And yeah, there's always this question of why are we reenacting old works? And I think, well, so we can learn from them, and sometimes we need to watch them from that lens of 1990, but sometimes we can take it and contemporize it with today's politics and watch it from a different angle and think of it still relevant, but relevant because it creates questions so that we learn and create new, different work that's not as problematic.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks.
I know we are running over a couple of minutes, but I would like to ask another question.
Sure, totally.
Well, I myself am a sculptor, but I'm also a dance teacher. I have been for 3 years, but I've never really found a moment where I feel comfortable in like merging my practices as one. And I feel like part of me wants them to become one, but I feel like I haven't had the space or the right time to like kind of approach it in that way. So I was wondering if you had like any advice for me as a dancer/artist.
I think for me, I mean, when after I did my master's, I found myself working a lot in sort of performance, and I found myself actually I was doing a lot of reenacting work from the Judson Church era. And I started to realize that actually what I wanted to do was not make performance. I didn't want to make this event. but I started to really think that the body is sculptural. We think about it as sculpture. We think about it in the same way that when you study drawing and sculpture about how the body, how is the bicep, how is the, how do you make a leg look like its true length? And so I try to look at it from that lens. And I guess for me is to, what I needed to do, because I came from a much stronger dance background than a visual art background, is that I actually needed to look more at sculpture as dance. So I've spent a lot of time actually going to museums and thinking about stuff. And there's obvious that Rodin's work has been said that it's quite choreographic because it almost feels like movement. But I've been trying to look at other sculptures and think about actually how are they movement, or what is the next step in that person? Like, what are they going to do next? But even though it's a frozen moment in time. And so this, to me, is how I started to approach it, is that I've realized which one I had less information about, and I went and I tried to then go and reapply it, and to reapply my knowledge of choreography to actual physical sculpture. And that's where I think it starts. And again, I felt like I also needed to look at the work not from the framework of, okay, here's the front, or is it in the round? It's almost like when I make work, I don't necessarily know how the audience will look at it, because, sculptures sit wherever they sit, and I don't feel that sculptors are saying, okay, this is the front, or, okay, this is meant, there are moments in history where they're meant to be 360, but I don't think they have the same dialogue as we do as choreographers about frontal spaces. And so I try never to think about the front. That's one of my only things too that I give my challenge, is like, don't think about this is where you want to look at it from. And so that's my own in way. I don't know if I answered how to encourage you, but I do think that trying to apply the knowledge of one medium to another medium.
Thank you. That was actually really useful.
Cool.
I think we will wrap it up there because no one else has got any questions and we're over the time a little bit. So thank you everyone for coming to tonight's talk. We will be back next week with Oliver, who I mentioned earlier. But thank you everyone and have a good rest of the night. See you.
Thank you.